trying to tell you something that I already said.
Chapter 9, Quiplash. The next few weeks, Abel and I hung out almost every day. And Avery too. We watched movies, helped each other with auditions, played games, and sang really loud in the car. We were a little threesome made for by Salem whenever they felt like joining. But I sort of love third wheeling, weirdly. You get to feel all of the love without any of the pressure. Avery and Abel were getting pretty close, but Abel had recently booked a play in New York and was going to be gone until May. He was set to leave on the 20th. I feel like he was letting himself free fall into the feeling of being in a relationship without overthinking it, really, since his leaving for so long sort of took the pressure off. A little part of me worried for Avery's well-being, though, just because I could feel what a sweet and sensitive boy he was. But I could also feel that he was just as intuitive as I was, meaning he knew, at least on some level, what he was getting himself into and was still down for the ride. I was a little bummed myself that Abel was leaving, just because I had grown so accustomed to having his energy around all the time. How can I explain it? His warmth just made me feel safe. But that's just part of this shit. Book a job and you're gone from friends and people you love for months at a time. But this was the first time we'd be apart since having gotten so close, and I couldn't help but feel just a tiny bit heartbroken. My abandonment issues that I hadn't yet started to face rearing their whiny little heads. But it was definitely buried deep inside under the excitement I felt for him and his upcoming adventure. The boy came back on the 17th day of the year, meaning him and Abel would only have a couple days together. The boy was a little broken up by this, which I thought was really cute. But, as I've said, Abel's a comet and doesn't get too caught up with nostalgia. He's great at riding the river of magic that life throws him down without ever really trying to grab hold of any rocks or boulders as objections to the current. I was curious what our dynamic would be like now that Abel and I had gotten so close. The three of us hadn't been together since before the kiss, so I was just interested to see what all this newness would feel like. Last time we were all together, they were both light buds to me. But a lot of pretty intense groundwork had been made since then on both sides of my ends. So I was just curious to see how it would all feel. The boy and I had been chatting here and there with a FaceTime or two sprinkled in over the course of the month that he'd been gone. I missed him, but it felt more like the way you miss a best friend than the way you miss a lover. Aside from little moments like him telling me he missed the smell of my pits. I don't wear deodorant because, for one, it's bad for you. And I know they have the natural kinds, but for two, I low-key like the smell of them too. Sometimes they smell like grapefruit, and other times they smell like sex. I'm down. He texted me the night he got back. How are you doing, little Billie? I pretended not to remember that today was the day, trying to play it cool, a little to him, but more to myself. I was hardcore committed to not wanting a relationship after my recent breakup, insisting that I wanted to focus on work as if the two can't coexist, while simultaneously being so stoked that he hit me up right away. I'm so good. I just went to yoga, gonna make some food, gonna shower, cause I stink. How are you? You could never stink, Billie. Just got back to LA and had a buddy's B-day. I loved it when he said my name so much. You're back! I miss you! I couldn't have been happier. I miss you. When can you hang, bruv? It had gotten pretty late and I'd fallen asleep, so I responded the next morning. Tonight, I have a meeting at 4 and then I'm free. I told Abel I'd hang with him tonight, but maybe we can all do something together. Yeah, duh. There he goes again with his weird separation shit. I didn't respond, so a couple hours later he said, hey, come hang with us when you're done. That's right, bitch! I didn't respond again because I was focused for my meeting, had a pretty big pitch to deliver. So by the time I got out a little after 5, I had a bunch of texts from Abel 2 yelling at me to come meet the two of them and Avery at dinner. I responded to Abel first, telling him I'd head over, and then the boy. I don't like Abel. Where are you guys? She thinks she's got jokes. He sent 3 oops face emojis and said, at dinner. Come. I was in Beverly Hills, wrapping up the best meeting of my career to date. I felt beautiful and powerful and like all my dreams were unfolding before my eyes, including the boy's love, which I was in full denial of wanting at all. It was a Friday, and it was rush hour, and in LA, that means you don't try to drive across town, especially from west to east. Ever. But nothing was stopping me from getting over to the east side to meet up with my reunited boys. Plus, no amount of traffic was going to kill this high. I bumped my playlist of the moment and set off on the hour-plus ride with a fat smile that gleamed out from inside. You're so beautiful and talented and amazing and fabulous, and I'm obsessed with you, so keep it up, bitch. By the time I got across town, they'd finished eating, so they ordered me some branzino to go. Very bougie, I know. And I met them back at Abel's. I was nervous, the way I am in new situations, and this situation full of people who I knew so deeply definitely felt nonetheless new. The boys were in Avery's car and going to park it in Abel's extra spot in the garage, so I parked out on the boulevard. My heart was racing, and a song sang, I cannot fall in love with you. To me through the speakers of my car from the shuffle of my playlist without my choosing. I got out and met them in the driveway. Avery was driving, Abel was in the back, and the boy sat shotgun. Billie! Abel shouted at me as he popped open the back door for me to hop in. We hadn't seen each other in a day or two, so he was acting extra excited. Hi, Billie. The boy turned his head around to look into my eyes. I weaved my right arm through the shoulder of the passenger seat like I was his seatbelt and laid my hand heavy on his chest for a hug from behind. He put his hands on top of mine and shot a heavy dose of love from his heart into the palms of our hand pile. It shook me. I forgot how intense this shit was. He kept my hand there, under both of his, all the way through the garage until we parked in Abel's extra spot, and then he finally let go. For a second. We all hopped out of the car and headed for the door, but the boy held back. Billie. I looked back to him. Yeah? Come here. He reached his arms out, and I went toward him. As I brushed past his face, going in for a hug, he caught my cheek with a kiss a little too hard, like that wasn't what he was aiming for. I sort of ignored it and just squeezed him tight. I turned and looked at him as we let go of our embrace, and he laid one on me like he'd been waiting to do it for a month and didn't even know it himself. I swear if his arms weren't around me, I would have gone weak in the knees and just fallen to a heap on the floor. We couldn't help but make out there for a few seconds, unable to separate until Abel's voice broke the trance. You guys, come on! I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect that. This was the first time we were around other people we knew since we'd kissed, besides picnic number 2, and the overwhelming affection was a lot. A lot. We mobbed up the cement stairwell to Abel's apartment and tumbled inside. Salem wasn't home, so it was just the 4 of us. It was dark in the apartment, save for some twinkling Christmas lights that gave the room a quiet charm. Abel has 2 couches that face parallel to one another. Abel and Avery sat on one while me and the boy sat on the other, and as I ate my branzino, we all decided we should eat some mushrooms tonight. Now, I know it may sound like we do this a lot, and maybe we do. I didn't even tell you about all the other times over the past month, to be honest. Just the relevant ones. But in my opinion, it's a hell of a lot better for you and your brain than drinking and most other drugs. It's expansive and eye-opening and gets you in touch with your deep, suppressed emotional truth. Plus, Abel bought a bunch from the Mushroom Man, and he was about to leave for like 4 months, so we had to eat him up. Clearly. Plus, it was still basically winter break or whatever. And the boy had never eaten them before, which made it sort of extra fun and exciting. He'd heard all about our recent adventuring and wanted to feel some of the fun for himself. We spread some almond butter on a couple rice cakes because I'd seen on Broad City that the fats in the nuts make you trip harder, and sprinkled the mushrooms on top. Then we ate them and sat on the couch, waiting for them to hit and deciding what to do next. The boy couldn't keep his hands off me. He sat next to me on our couch, and every time I'd look even remotely in his direction, he'd come in for a kiss and we'd start making out. I wanted to stop for the sake of everyone's hang, but I also couldn't. It felt like a fix that I'd been pining for without even fully realizing I'd missed it so much. Drugs. At first, Abel was getting annoyed. You guys! I know you haven't seen each other, but come on! Then he surrendered to just making out with Avery too. We were like a bunch of little middle schoolers at a makeout party. It was comical. But Avery and Abel had been spending virtually every waking moment together of late, so that got old for them pretty fast. Let's go do something! We could go to that pretty hike behind my house, said Avery. Ooh, that sounds fun. Sure, I'm down. We hopped in an Uber and rode the 15 or so minutes to Avery's house. The boy sat up front, and I squeezed back into my comfy third wheel spot with the other 2. Relieved to have a moment of breath from the intensity of the boy's touch. Avery's highly skilled in improv comedy and started to riff about something silly to the Uber driver. The boy and Abel joined in freely, and I remember feeling a little frozen by all of it. A little intimidated, but even more in awe of the beautiful talent surrounding me. Avery lives in a big apartment building too, sort of like Abel's, but the neighborhood it's in is full of big family homes that feel like they're full of ghosts. The entrance to the hike was about a 15-minute walk from his. We set off through the spooky neighborhood, now lit up with vibrant colors and exaggerated scale through the lens of our mushroom goggles. Everything on mushrooms looks extra large to me. I suppose I can't speak for anyone else, but I was tripping. Them extra fats or whatever done did their work. Mushrooms always make me warm and fuzzy and cuddly, and the boys that way on mushrooms are not, with everyone. Boy, girl, they, platonic, sexual. Physical touch is undeniably one of his main languages of love. So there was a lot of that happening, as I'm sure you can imagine, but as the boy held my hand on our walk, it felt like his grasp was wrapped around my heart. Not sure if it was the drugs that we ate or the drugs from our touch, but it was definitely freaking me out. We'd been having some rare LA rain of late, so the entrance to the hike was full of slushy, wet mud. So much so that there was caution tape warning against our entrance. It looked like a tree had fallen that they hadn't yet had the chance to help back up. But we maneuvered onward, past the tapes, sliding. I'm having a hard time. I wear glasses, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, and usually I can get by with just reading it, and it's like no big deal, but I can't see shit right now, but we're just gonna keep going because my hair looks fucking bomb thanks to Shay. Okay, anyways. But we maneuvered onward past the tapes, sliding and sludging under the beautifully clear night sky with its stars looking down on us with twinkles in their eyes. Its usual sheer curtain of smog had been washed away, even if only for a moment, leaving the heavens naked and glistening from their winter rinse. It smelled like dew as we made our way up toward the lookout spot, maybe 10 minutes up. We stopped at the top of the first hill and looked out over the sparkling city all together in silence. It was gorgeous. I don't think I feel them. I laughed to myself. I could feel that he could feel them. He just didn't know he could. Whenever we were together, it honestly felt like we were on drugs. And I think that may have been confusing him a bit. The feeling for mushrooms is pretty subtle, after all. A warm, tingly goodness, vibrant colors, and emotional breath could all easily be confused with love. Especially under the dark night sky and in the company of dear friends you haven't seen in a while. Then I looked over and he had started to cry. It's not funny, but it's so funny. Says he doesn't feel the mushrooms, and then I look over and he's crying? Come on, baby boy, have some clarity about yourself. Jeez. What's wrong? He started to cry harder. What is it, buddy? Said Abel. I'm just gonna miss you, man. I just got back and now you're leaving. Abel grabbed him in a hug. He was almost in a sob. Sweet baby boy. Abel clutched him harder and they held each other in the sweetest embrace you ever saw while the boy cried about missing his best friend. Meanwhile, me and Avery had our own little cuddle puddle. Avery's towering stance mixed with his gentle spirit make for some of the best hugs you've ever felt. And then we all combined for a big group hug, the boys' moment making us all realize how much we'd miss this precious little dynamic that would come to a close with Abel's leaving, even though we'd only just first experienced it tonight. We broke apart and looked back out to the view to catch our breath. After a few moments of enjoying the city's twinkle, the boy turned to me and pulled me toward him. He kissed me for a moment and then put his forehead against mine and just stayed there, breathing my breath. I think you feel them. You do? Yeah. Why's that? I just do. They're subtle. I just kind of feel like I can't tell who I am. What do you mean? I don't know how else to explain it. At the time, I didn't know what he meant by that or even overthink it, really. But looking back, I think this could have been something to do with how psychedelics bring forward your emotional world, whether you want to feel it or not. Something he was not used to doing, unless it was poured through the funnel of the controlled and therefore safe circumstance of a character, that is. We wandered back down the side of the hill, through the slush of the mud, and back into the eerie, winding neighborhood toward Avery's. The walk home was giggly and even spookier than before, probably because we were tripping harder. I remember at one point a thought tinged up with heartache through my system, wetting my eyes while I looked off at a big haunted house to my right to hide it. Man, I'm gonna miss Abel so much. But the thought was immediately interrupted by my slamming into the back of him. He'd stopped in my walking path and my zone out kept me from noticing. Just the universe reminding me he was still right there, I suppose. And maybe just a little extra love from the powers that be trying to reassure my abandonment-fearing mind that I didn't have to worry about losing him. That didn't stop me, of course, but never on the surface, or even in my conscious mind. Those things rest in me somewhere deep inside. We went back to Avery's and warmed up by the fire, and after a bit, called an Uber to head back to Abel's. Back at home, we decided to play a round of Quiplash. If you know, you know, but if you don't, it's pretty inarguably the most fun game of all time. Random ass prompts are projected onto the TV screen, and your task is to come up with the silliest, most creative answer that you then enter into your phone under a time crunch to be voted upon by the other members of the group. Avery's improv expertise made him completely superior to the rest of us with our potty humor and dick jokes. It's so fun. We used to play with Lil a lot too. The boy always gets a little overly competitive with it though. In a lighthearted, funny way, usually. I get it. We're all competitive, always pushing ourselves to have to be the smartest and the best. But on this particular night, I could feel the tinges of anger, shame, or jealousy shoot up through his chest as if it was my own. I don't know if it was the mushrooms or deepening connection or whatever, or what. He sat on one end of our couch and I sat on the other with my feet toward him. And I remember at one moment, I could feel so much embarrassment hiding in his chest that my body lifted up my foot almost involuntarily and pressed it into his chest to calm him. He grabbed my foot with both his hands and pressed it into him harder, as if for dear life. So much of our friendship has happened without words in this way. Maybe the most special thing about us, while also being the biggest shame. The game ended. Avery won, of course. Slaughtered the rest of us, really. And then another chapter of the middle school makeout party ensued. I had on jeans with a giant rip across the seat of my right butt cheek. I didn't buy them that way. They ripped on their own, made me love them all the more. The boy was starting to make his way inside it with his hands to see what he could get away with. Abel was over us. I'm tired. He said it loud and blunt with a loving undertone of get out of my house. Me too. AKA copy that. Me three, said Avery, always shooting out love in the name of keeping the peace. Can we sleep over? No. Why not? Because I want to be alone with Avery. This is my second to last night. Go to yours. Why can't we sleep in your bed? What? Because no. He's clearly joking, Abel. I was laughing. It always surprises me how I can read him more than most other people, especially his close friends. He does have a weird sense of humor. Says shit just to get a rise out of people, almost. And Abel, for the most part, takes what you say as truth. Whereas I'm always much more trusting of what's going on beneath what anyone is willing to say out loud. Oh, well, go home. He'd had enough of us and our childish PDA. I didn't blame him. We're being pretty gross. But I still couldn't help it. You want to come to mine? Yeah. I said it lightly, as if to say, sure, why not? Like I had to think about it or something. Like there was a chance I was going anywhere else. Please. We got in my car and drove the short trip up the boulevard to his place. The ride was quiet, but full, sleepy, but intense on what we knew was coming next. We parked and went inside. I took off my shoes and left them at the top of the entry staircase while he poured us some water from the Brita in the kitchen. I went in there to get a sip. Man, I'd missed his place. Almost more than I missed him. Honest. It was dark, and he didn't turn on any lights. I put down the glass of water, and he grabbed me by the hips and turned me around to face him. Gently, but with force. And then we started to kiss. Rhythmic. Passionate. He lightly pulled the ends of my hair with the tips of his fingers just above the small of my back. I really like your long hair. Yeah? Yeah. One of my favorite things about him is that he doesn't say things like that unless he really means it. He undid my pants without coming up for air. I undid his. We were up against the wall of the breakfast nook in his kitchen. Where's Winona? Asleep. Within a few seconds, we were both naked in the nook. He turned me around and laid me over the built-in kitchen table. He ran his hand down the side of my right thigh and then up the back of my leg, grabbing onto my right cheek. Such a great ass. He said it to himself more than me. The sex was not the same as before. Connected, in tune. The pace dictated by a current flowing through us that neither one of us controlled but simply had surrendered to. I want to fuck you all night. And he did. Until we came together at the same time.
Ass fat, yeah I know. You just got cash, blow some more, blow some more. spin it, the faster go. Bad bitches on the floor. It's raining hundreds. Throw some more. Throw some more. Throw some more. Throw some more.
Franklin's raining on your body. Raining on your body. Raining on your body. Won't you do what I said? Start rubbing on your body. You like honey's on your body. Well, you need to get naughty. Hold up, hold on. Eyes on me. Is that your hoe? If so, I'ma get her for the nights over. DJ playing my shit, so I'm finna crank up off in the VIP zone. See the money go up and she dance on sight. By the end of the night, she on endo. Let me see you make it clap on tempo. Let me see you get low like limbo.
Ass fat. Yeah, I know. You just got cash. Blow some more. Blow some more. Blow some more. The more you spin it, the faster go. Bad bitches on the floor. It's raining hundreds. Throw some more. Throw some more. Throw some more. Throw some more.